Welcome back to Started from the Bottom. I am your host, Susan Peterson. Today, I'm so excited. We have DeRose in studio. Aaron, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thanks
for having me.
Of course. It's a big get for us, Mr. DeRose. Okay, so how did you get started?
Started in venture or started career-wise?
Career-wise, let's go there first.
Yeah, all right. Well, it's actually kind of, I guess, one and the same question or story. So I originally got introduced to the world of venture capital when I was finishing my last semester at the University of Utah. There was a small group of us that had this idea of really kind of launching a venture capital fund that was managed by students. This would have been early 2000s. And the idea behind it was we would set up a 501c3. We would raise capital into that 501c3, form these little pods amongst the student groups with a focus on venture capital, and partner with the venture funds that were here in this community at that time. And we would provide due diligence support, market research, valuation work, do these kinds of things for free for these local funds. And in exchange, we would get exposure, we would get experience, and, hopefully get a chance to co-invest alongside those funds. And, that little group ultimately turned into the University Venture Fund, which in the early days was just for the University of Utah. It's since become much larger. And that's, ultimately become the University Growth Fund, which is one of the capital providers here in Utah. And so it was kind of through that experience, when we started setting up our pods, there were only 4 or 5 venture capital funds here in Utah at that time. And the pod that I was leading, we teamed up with V-Spring Capital and started working with the team there. And that's where I originally met Greg Warnock for the first time. And the team at V-Spring, Greg was there, Jeff Curl, J.D. Gardner, Clark Miyazaki, Gavin Christensen. An amazing group of young kind of investment professionals and who ultimately became entrepreneurs were all in that place at the same time. And so as we started working with that group, I was hooked. I knew that venture is where I ultimately wanted to be, or doing private equity style investing was kind of the path for me. The challenge is I was wrapping up school, and it's an industry that you typically don't get into right out of college. And so I was asking around, people who had been in the industry for a while, saying, how do I get into this? How do you break into venture? And the feedback was, you tend to go one of two routes. You either start in investment banking and you start learning the ropes of just the capital markets in general and how to write materials and how to do due diligence and underwrite things. And you spend some period of time in investment banking, you go to graduate school, and then maybe you come back into a larger private equity or venture capital fund. That was kind of path number one. Or path number two was, go be an entrepreneur, go do a startup, go run a company, go be an operator. And maybe at some point you kind of boomerang back into this industry, but it really wasn't in the cards that was something that I could do right out of school. And so I wasn't really interested in investment banking, decided to go the operator route. And so right when I graduated, we moved to Southern California, my wife and I, and started my career as an operations and strategy consultant with Gemini, Ernst Young, which on one hand was great because, I got a peek into some of the large Fortune 500 companies to see how they ran their businesses and how they operated. My clients were Disney and Sony and Vans and Raytheon and Boeing, huge businesses. And the positive to that was, having that kind of exposure right out of school, first part of your career, was really interesting and learned a lot. The tough part was, my firm was billing us out at $150 an hour, and we're supposed to go into these big companies and tell them, what's wrong with their business and how to operate it more efficiently. That was always kind of a tough dynamic for me. But it ended up being a good experience. I spent almost 3 years with the NY. It was a stepping stone to get me into graduate school, which it did. And then when I transitioned into Quiksilver, that was really where I would say it was the beginning of the catalyst to get me into the world of investing.
So you went to graduate school and then you went to Quiksilver after?
I was doing both. So I did an executive MBA. So I was working full time and then going to school at nights and on weekends. That's, how I did my MBA program. So both at the same time.
Oh, cool.
Yep. Yeah. So at Quick, it was interesting. I caught Quiksilver at a moment in time where they were still publicly traded. We were $3.5 billion in revenue. We were growing at 25% year over year. It was a hot brand. And not a lot of people know that Quiksilver owned a whole portfolio of companies at one point. And that was the era that I caught them in, was during our acquisition and M&A spree. So, we bought DC Shoes, we bought Rossignol Ski Company, Dynastar, Lang Boots, Look Bindings, Cleveland Golf, Tony Hawk Skate Line, LibTech. We had a dozen brands under the umbrella. And so our team was working with the investment banks and our banking partners, and we were structuring the deals and doing due diligence. And once we would acquire these companies, we would, work with their management teams and getting them integrated into Quiksilver. And so, we did almost $1 billion worth of acquisitions in 3.5 years.
Wow.
So it was a cool time to be at Quiksilver. It was a lot of work. We worked crazy hours, 100+ hour weeks, as we were getting these deals over the finish line and completed. And so, ended up staying there for a handful of years. And then when my oldest son, he was born in Southern California, he was getting to the age where it's getting into the school system, and we were trying to decide where we're going to raise our families. We were looking at a couple different places on where we would settle in and try to build a longer term career. And Utah was actually kind of middle of the list. And coincidentally, I reached back out to Greg Warnock, who I had known going back to the university venture days. And I knew he was actively investing here. Actually wasn't reaching out for a venture or a private equity job. It was more to be an operator of a startup or a high growth company. And he pitched me this idea of Mercato. This was in the early days. Really hadn't raised a fund, didn't have a portfolio, team was still really small. Said, hey, we're going to start Utah's first growth equity fund, and would love to have you be a part of it. So made the move back to Utah in late 2007 to really start working on getting Mercato up and off the ground. And I was splitting time between Mercato and working at Skullcandy, which is where I met Jeremy Andrus, who's my current business partner now. But for me, that was kind of the beginning of getting into investing. My career, I would say, started more as a growth equity or a private equity investor. And over time, it's, now spanned venture capital, growth equity, buyout, and real estate. That's been a little bit of a progression over time. But for me, that's where it started. It was really coming out of college, having my first exposure starting UVF. And then, 8.5 years at Mercato is where I would say really kind of cut my teeth on the deal side.
So at Quiksilver, you, because I think it's easy to gloss it over and be like, yeah, we did $1 billion worth of investments in 3 years. It's astronomical, insane.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And then to integrate those brands into one company, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them went really well and some didn't go so well. The statistic is more than half of M&A deals ultimately fail. And I think more of that is a function of what happens post-acquisition. There's the dating phase of getting a deal completed, and how you structure it and how you price it is important, but ultimately how the two companies come together and whether or not you realize the, quote, synergies that are always part of the underwriting process is where a lot of companies fail. we had a pretty good internal team that was the post-acquisition integration group. And then we used, McKinsey on a handful of occasions to help with some of that post-integration work as well. But the deal might take 3, 4, 5 months. The integration could take 2.5 years. That's where the real work starts.
Do you feel like it was a function of people or like systems getting in the way when things were unsuccessful?
I would say it was more often on kind of the people and culture side. We found that when we acquired a business, we continued to have them run autonomously as if they were continuing down their own path. And we helped where we could, but stayed out of the way when we needed to. That was definitely the case with DC Shoes. They continued to operate out of Vista, their own headquarters, their own facility. That those worked better. Where we ran into conflict is when there was a lot of friction or challenge amongst the executive teams, and it just slows down everything.
Yeah.
Decision making, people become disengaged, less motivated. And at some point, you start dealing with attrition and you're losing some of your best people, and, the wheels can come off pretty quickly.
Yeah. I do find I've seen a couple of deals in my day, not $1 billion worth, but a few. I feel like usually like the decision makers are totally bought in, right? And then you go like one step down from the decision makers, and you have people that kind of operate around a scarcity model, and they're like, wait, what does this mean for me?
Yeah.
And they can't get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And so they kind of, sometimes I feel like that's the state or that level of employment is where a lot of things can go wrong that I've seen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And those first 90 days are the most critical. How it's communicated, making sure people do feel like they understand what the world is going to look like the next day, the next week, the next month, what their role is going to be. There's a lot of anxiety and just a little bit of panic when something like that happens. And so I think the way it's communicated, making people feel like they're being brought into a culture that is hopefully fairly similar to the one that they were already building, those things make a huge difference.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so I would love, first question. Do you feel like you've always been like a money counter? Have you always been interested in money, like growing up?
No,
Entrepreneurial?
No, not necessarily. Entrepreneurial, maybe a little bit. A money counter or focused on money, probably less so. I would say that became a much bigger part of my career when I was a fund manager. As soon as you raise money from someone else, you really feel that weight and stewardship and responsibility on your shoulders. So, I would say Mercato was probably the first time that weight was truly felt, as far as focusing on the money, focusing on returns, focusing on that kind of stuff. But, thinking about businesses and thinking about entrepreneurship, I would say that's been kind of in my heritage and DNA for a long time, going back to, the family that I come from.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Like, tell me more.
Yeah. So, I'm from a small family. I have one sibling, older brother who's 5 years older than I am. We grew up in West Valley, near Granger High School. My dad started a plumbing business in the mid-'80s. He was a pipe fitter in the Navy and then started his own plumbing company and ran that his whole life. Same business, same industry, same focus for his entire career until he passed away in 2019. My brother ultimately stayed in that business his whole career. He kind of took it over and now runs it as an independent, owner now. I was in the family business early on. We all started in it when we were 13. It was kind of the expectation that when you turn 13, you were going to start, working full time during the summers and support the family business. And so, I didn't really know to call my dad an entrepreneur as
Yeah.
a young kid watching him go through that. But looking back, seeing the path that he paved and the example that he set and my brother has since set, it's been in our family forever.
That's amazing. Do you feel like that's where your work ethic comes from?
It was certainly kind of the early building blocks of it. Yeah. I mean, my construction it's a hard industry. It's hard work. It's manual labor. You're working outside. You're working with your hands. You're working with tools. It's definitely hard work. And my dad had the expectation that, you're going to work hard no matter what. And so glad that I had that experience, certainly set the foundation. And, I feel like every step of the career up until this point has been mostly about just doing the work. I honestly wouldn't consider myself, like extremely intelligent or the smartest guy around. I've tried to work hard at what I do and not be outworked.
Are you a handyman around the house? Or do you hire that out?
Certain things. There are some things, not everything.
Do you hire out the plumbing?
No.
You do it yourself?
Yeah, did that. Honestly, for most things, and whether it's around the house or mechanically or stuff, if I can figure it out or if I can watch a YouTube video and figure it out, I tend to do it. And if I can't, I won't.
So you still like working with your hands every now and then?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
You kind of remind me of, I grew up in a really, in Washington, in Eastern Washington, it's like a huge farming community.
Yeah.
And you remind me a little bit of like one of the farm boys who went into finance. Where, it's still in there, but you're definitely not doing it on the day-to-day.
Yeah.
But you can pull it out if you need to.
I definitely still have some blue collar in me. I just tend to work in a white collar industry.
Yeah,
right? That's how it is.
For sure. Okay. I would love to talk about your investing process. So given the landscape today, I mean, money it's very interesting today, actually. Money's not, 2 years ago, it'd be a totally different conversation than what we're having today. It's a little more expensive. There's some restraints on it, but what kind of companies get you excited?
Well, first of all, you're right. It's definitely different market dynamics. Fundraising landscape is completely different, and it's crazy how fast it changed and switched. I feel like it was a pretty steady, progressive climb over the last decade.
Yeah.
But then end of 2019, 2020, 2021, everything just shot up. The amount of capital being raised, the number of deals getting closed, oversubscribed rounds, crazy valuations, how fast everything was moving. It accelerated so quickly over that 2.5-year period. And then when Q1 of last year hit, it all just completely shut off. And we saw, a lot of companies that were dependent on outside capital, reopening rounds, top off rounds, runway extension rounds, just trying to buy themselves more time to weather the storm while capital markets were shut down, trying to figure out how do we get to our next financing now that the metrics are kind of a moving goalpost. So that dynamic is absolutely at play and true today. The private markets tend to lag behind. They're a little slower to react to some of that stuff than the public markets are. It happened really quickly in the public markets, especially in the tech sector. And it's starting to manifest itself more and more. We saw less deals getting done last year. That's continued into this year. When you do find something, it's not 10x oversubscribed, closing in 3 weeks at a valuation like 5 times higher than it used to be. So it feels like things are starting to settle down and get a little more normal. To your question about what's interesting, what do we like? I would say it depends on the kind of investment that I'm making. Venture, the lens through which you see the world in an early stage venture deal, is a lot different than what I might like or think is interesting on a growth equity deal or even a buyout deal. And, what I would say is and we tend to invest mostly between venture and growth equity. That's the stuff we like. We have a long track record of doing it, huge portfolio, a lot of kind of looks at bat in those two spaces. And what I would say is in venture, what I like and usually what the crux of the decision comes down to, it's only a small handful of things. How big truly is this problem that they're solving and sort of the market opportunity that they're solving it in. How compelling or disruptive is the product or the service or whatever it is about their model that they're trying to bring out to market. And at the end of the day, you want to have a very dynamic leader that, for me, I'm more interested in their ability to sell than anything, and not even necessarily sell their product or solution, just be a salesperson in general. I mean, as in a startup, yeah, it's important to sell customers, but you're also selling your employees, you're selling your financial partners, you're selling a lot of people who are stakeholders in your business on an idea or a vision of something that is unproven that's going to happen over the next several years.
Right.
And so I care a lot more about those kind of attributes and character in a leader. I think that's going to be important when you're looking at a venture deal and you know that it may take 3 or 4 or 5 rounds of financing before this thing gets to the finish line. And there's going to be a lot of selling across the whole landscape that's going to happen between here and there. So that might be what's important to me in a venture deal, whereas in a growth deal, I personally love stuff that's kind of the non-sexy, off the beaten path, the stuff that you have to kind of dig for, but they're founder-owned and operated businesses that have been around for several years, and they're profitable and they're cash flowing and they control their own destiny and they're not dependent upon 4 rounds of financing to get them there. Like, I love those businesses. I think they're fantastic. That's more around just execution, entrepreneurs who can grit forward and do what they say they're going to do.
Lots of discipline.
Yeah.
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 Shoot, I had a question about, because I see a lot of early stage female operated businesses, specifically in product, which in Utah, I think there's only a few people that are investing in product. We're very tech focused out here, which is great. That's where the money's come from. That's what people have experience in who don't understand fundraising at all, and who a lot of people think that bringing on fundraising or bringing on money means that you're now bringing on a boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to explain to them, no. Like, good investors, they don't want to run your company.
Yeah.
They have no interest in it.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's like nervous about that? Like, from your experience?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. I have found that it's too often the case that entrepreneurs may be overly sensitive and more focused on sometimes the things that don't matter as much in the long term. Their ownership, valuation, dilution, like those things always tend to be top of mind, priority numero uno. And if you take a step back and say, well, it's going to feel like a marriage. We're going to be in this for the next 10 years together.
Nothing's felt more like dating to me.
Yeah.
Dating to marry than raising money.
You're absolutely right. And once you make that commitment, those are not easy things to unwind.
No.
I mean, you're kind of in the boat together regardless for the next several years.
Yeah, until you get a buyout.
Exactly. Or you can recap them out or find some other buyer to take their shares, whatever it might be. And so, I'm definitely of the opinion that the quality of your partner and being open in terms of the expectations of what do you expect from them in terms of being helpful and, quote, value add partners to you? How involved do you want them to be? Do they expect to be? How are they actually going to support you? And whether that's customer introductions, building team, vision, strategy, culture, go down the list of things that investors can try to do to be helpful to an entrepreneur where they're not actually running the business day to day. Those kinds of things are important. You want to know Is your investor going to be supportive over the long term? You know, if you need another round of financing, or you're thinking I'm taking a smaller round right now amongst friends and families or angels or family offices, but maybe someday I'm going to raise institutional capital. Are they going to be helpful in that process? Can they make introductions? You know, I think those dynamics are a lot more important than just trying to optimize either the amount of capital I'm raising or the highest valuation, or what is it going to look like in the press releases, you know, here locally. That's the stuff that doesn't matter long term. It's the
100%.
partnership that matters.
Yeah, I agree. I have incredible investors, and I feel like it's been value add from day one. I mean, we had a big challenge 6 months in and really had to like solve for that. And I had to come in with a bridge loan, and they came in, they matched their percentage. And there's never been we're going to pull out. Like, hey,
Yeah.
this is a rounding error for us. Good
Yeah.
luck, but we're going to pull out. It's always been supportive and really cool. And I think just like in a marriage, there's going to be unforeseen challenges that come up. And if you
Yeah.
pick the wrong one, like, sucks.
Yeah. And I think choosing a partner that has, you know, significant experience and exposure and track record in a space is important, because they understand these dynamics that you just barely said. They know that not every business goes perfectly,
Yeah.
that there's ups and downs, there's pivots. It requires a lot of patience and just understanding that sometimes things are going to be good and sometimes things are going to be really tough, but we're in it together through the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that kind of commitment is important.
100%. Okay. So then if again, back to a lot of people who are wanting to raise money, how do people go about that? I know how I went about it, but like I get that a lot. Like,
Yeah.
how do I raise money? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, build a deck.
Yeah. Well, so there's the process of raising money.
Yeah.
That might be one of them, but I think even taking a step back from there is really being real with yourself about, is this a business that should raise outside capital? I'm actually a believer that not every business is a fundable business.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's a bad business. But especially if you're going to raise institutional money,
Yep.
venture capital money, private equity money, there are certain expectations around how that business is going to perform and the timeline associated with that, and selling it a certain number of years into the hold period, you know, being able to meet certain milestones and criteria to set you up for the next raise and the next raise and the next raise. You know, there's clearly certain business models that are venture type businesses where, you know, it's highly dependent on outside capital. It's going to require several rounds to get there. You usually need institutional partners. It's going to be an 8 to 10 year journey. But if it goes well, you know, it's going to be 100 times your money. That is a venture deal. Whereas there are others where it may not be a good fit for either venture capital or institutional money. And then you have to get a little more creative about, where does that come from? Is it friends? Is it family? Is it SBA loan? Is it angel groups? Is it family offices? You know, that there is certainly capital out there. The challenge is finding it, because a lot of those capital providers are intentionally out of the spotlight and flying under the radar. Otherwise, they would just get bombarded nonstop with businesses that really don't have any business raising money. And so it's a relationship driven business. It's a network, you know, driven business as well. And so having access to those kinds of capital is important. But if you're going down the traditional path, you're right. I mean, it definitely starts with a deck and an idea and, you know, a financial model and a cap table, and think of the most common stuff that shows up in a data room. You know, being able to tell the story, being able to give the pitch, being able to answer questions about what this business is going to look like over the next 2 or 3 years, that's all important. And most of the groups are good about having that first conversation, you know, giving you a look. hearing the story. And from there, that's the hard part. Most investors are looking at several hundreds of opportunities every given year, and they're going to say no to 99% of them. And so it's a lot of follow-up. It's a lot of circling back. It's a lot of getting on people's radar before you're actually fundraising or needing the money. And it's building relationships and having a lot of touch points along the way before you actually get a check.
100%. I think for deck, something that I don't remember who told me this, but it's so true. Number and narrative. So you have to have then your numbers so dialed in, because there's got to be some intellectual honesty around what your numbers mean, whether you want them to mean that or not. You have to be super honest with yourself, and then coming up with a narrative to support the numbers.
Yeah.
And that's how I've always approached any communication with my relationship with my investors, is whether the news is good, whether the news is bad, whatever it is, presenting the number with the narrative so that they don't have to go then look up the narrative and figure it out for themselves. I mean, and being totally honest and transparent around all that.
Yeah.
And as you're building a deck too, like there are parts of your business that are just no one's business is perfect.
Right.
And there are parts that are going to come out in due diligence. They're going to come out. So whether they're good or whether they're bad, putting them in there so that everyone understands right up front what's happening. And then having a narrative around it. There has to be an explanation for the numbers.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the idea of, I really like what you said in terms of honesty and transparency. Most smart investors are going to get to the bottom of the story one way or another.
100%.
Right? And so if you're not open and honest and transparent about it, then you lose trust and credibility because it looks like you're hiding something, right? Now, the other side of that coin is everybody also know. The only thing we know with 100% certainty is that whatever the model or forecast or budget is that it's wrong.
Right.
It's just a matter of how far off
Yeah.
wrong are we,
Yeah.
right? That's just, everybody knows that. That's the
Right.
expectation. And so that's the good thing. There should be some comfort in knowing that we're going to do our best at planning and budgeting and forecasting and creating a model. But the point you made about you're using the word narrative, but the other piece is just, do you have credible assumptions? Have you been thoughtful? These are the assumptions we're using to build this model or put the numbers together. This is what we believe is true. This is why we believe it's true. Here's, the data to back that up. And we're going to go through and execute, and the numbers are going to shake out where they're going to shake out. But I think going through that process of at least vetting your own assumptions, developing the narrative, and being able to support everything that you put out there as part of your plan or your budget, that's the important part. That's where you get all of the bonus points and the credibility with investors.
Yeah, and I feel like that goes back to your sales comment earlier. There are times in your business where you have to be a used car salesman. And then there are times in your business where the car has to sell itself.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes with your customers, you have to what did Clark say once? He said, your excess inventory is like the hair on your body. Like you just have to get rid of it. And so there are times when that just has to happen.
Yeah.
But with your investor, I would say like that's the relationship where credibility, once it's lost, it's so hard to get back.
Oh, yeah.
And just getting out in front of every issue and making sure that you're always being as honest as you can be is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay. What's the scrappiest thing you've ever done?
Ooh, scrappiest.
Yeah.
I bought a business in 2016 in the health and fitness space.
Okay.
And ran that for a few years. It was a family-owned company, small business. They had one location that basically did nutrition coaching, meal planning, exercise services. We had a full-service private gym. They had one location in Draper. And so I bought that company and opened two more facilities, one up in Davis County, one in Utah County. expanded the team 3X, expanded revenue 3X, margin improvement. I mean, all this kind of stuff in just running and operating a small company. And, I think back on that time, and I was the CEO, the COO, the CMO, the CFO, the facilities manager, the janitor. I mean, it's just literally doing everything. We had a really great team of coaches that would work with the clients, but when it came to running the business itself, it was a pretty lonely island, and virtually, very little balance sheet capital. And so we just had to figure out how to do a lot of stuff ourselves and do a lot with a little. It ended up being, a time in my career where I probably learned more than any other time running an early stage startup. It was really hard, challenging business model, worked insane hours. Ironically, I was running a fitness company, and it was the time in my life when I was the worst shape of my life, just not taking care of myself at all because
you didn't have time.
We were just working so much.
Yeah.
But that was a gritty, kind of scrappy chapter for sure.
It's actually shocking because I've known a couple of consultants in my day, and most of them don't like to be operators.
Yeah.
And you started out as consultant. Yeah. Do you feel like it's from like working with your dad, or you just like to get your hands dirty, or what is it?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't think I was in consulting long enough to have had that really shape, my skill set or the direction of my career. I mean, I was at it for a few years when I was young. I was right outside of college. I think if I had spent 10, 15, 20 years as a consultant, and then you try to go and be a startup entrepreneur, those very, very rarely go well. No. You're right. It's tough because you go from this world of trying to tell people what to do and prescribe a blueprint for them to follow, but then you walk away and it's up to them to actually execute and deliver on it. Whereas an entrepreneur or CEO, it's the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. Like you are the thinker, the talker, and the doer. You have to do all three.
And a lot of time you're executing and you can't actually put to words how you're doing it.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, he's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just, I think that's more a function of just not being in consulting that long. However, I do deal with that same idea or concept as an investor, in the capacity of a board member. Sometimes we invest in a company. It's not always the case, but if we lead or co-lead around, it's often that we're involved at the board level. And that's a similar dynamic that you deal with as a board member. You're trying to be there as a supportive partner, and sometimes you have your governance hat on, and sometimes you have your strategy/operations person hat on. But at the end of the day, you're not running that company. You can try to be helpful and you can offer opinion and advice and counsel, but you're kind of a passive passenger at that point. And so, I just feel like after having done it as long as I've been doing it, being able to switch between advisor mode and actual operator mode, I just feel I've been doing that for a while. So it's a little more natural for me than it may be for others.
Yeah, you're very fluent in both. Mm. Do you have any fun mantras you live by?
Like life mantras, business mantras? Sure. What are we talking about?
Whatever.
I wouldn't say, mantras, but maybe some philosophies. I came from a family that was very much a work hard, play hard family. Mm. My wife came from a farming family, probably similar to yours.
Work hard, play hard.
No, they were just work hard. Work hard. That was it.
I'm work hard, nap hard kind of girl, but yes, continue.
Yeah. So, her family, farming family, hardworking family, very religious family. And it was, the family that prays together, stays together. And our family was the family that plays together, stays together. So we've always kind of had that mentality of we do work hard, we play hard, we enjoy time together, very much kind of a family-focused DNA. Growing up with my immediate family, my dad's Italian, family is everything to the Italian culture. We were a very, very close family. I feel like that's carried over to some extent in my own family as well. So we definitely follow that one. And then, I think work or career wise, the things that matter a lot to me, and some of this has been picked up over the years, but they've now become, as core to my personal culture as anything. And that is just simply, how you treat people, your personal brand, your personal reputation, honesty, integrity, character, working hard, kind of checking, pride, greed, ego, the things that tend to be those that blow up companies and cultures and management teams. Those are the ones that I feel like I'm not going to compromise on. That when I'm making decisions or deciding what to do or who to do it with, like those are the core to that decision. So I don't know if you call those mantras, but they're core principles that are very important to me.
Do you feel like you've had a time in your career where you've had to compromise on those things?
No, not had to in the sense of like, you need to do this, you're being forced to, or go find another job. Nothing like that. But being in this business, there are certainly opportunities that come up where it would be easy to not have an abundance mentality where you feel like in order for me to win, it has to be at the expense of someone else losing. It's not a win-win scenario. And it's where a lot of investors can start developing kind of a tougher reputation and get bad is when you're overly aggressive on that side. And it's almost like you're taking advantage of situations. So, I feel like it's been a pretty good run thus far, being able to avoid some of those things. I've certainly seen them play out in other circumstances, but no, I feel like it's gone okay so far.
Cool. What is one lesson that you learned early on in your business that's still true today, or your career, I guess I would say?
I think one of them, going back to the beginning of this story, is that there are really no substitutions and no shortcuts for hard work.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to go on and do something big or build something big or accomplish great things, it's going to require work. It's going to require work. And in most cases, it's going to require some level of risk. And so, I think when it comes to advice, I wish I had taken some more risk earlier in my career. I get asked, especially from young entrepreneurs, that piece of advice often is, what would you do differently or what advice would you have? And I would definitely say take risks earlier. It's easier when you're younger and you don't have 5 kids and a mortgage and a whole bunch of other things lifestyle related that you're trying to shake up. But being willing to take risk, being willing to just put in the time, put in the effort, put in the work, and know that nothing is owed to you, that you're going to have to go out and earn whatever it is that you're going to end up with. That's been the expectation that was placed on me in a family plumbing business from my dad at 13, and I think it still holds true today. I wish I were better at that as a father. I have a son who's almost 19 now, and I'm trying to play a little bit of catch up in instilling some of those things in him. But yeah, I've just been one of those people that puts my head down and works. I don't want to be outworked.
Do you feel like, so have you always been comfortable with risk, or were you like risk averse when you first started out?
I was more risk averse.
How'd you get comfortable with it?
I don't know if you're ever truly comfortable with it.
Well, like Jeremy, he loves risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, he like chases it. He even says he chases it up the mountain, right? And I actually love risk. I feel really comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Calculated risk.
Yeah.
But I think to go from being not taking a ton of risks to being riskier, there's got to be some sort of like it's a change, it's a switch. And so
Yeah.
I think
It is a switch in mentality for sure. And for me, I think the reason that switch happened so much later, where I started taking more risk and being more entrepreneurial and starting a lot of different things later in my career, was one, a function of just confidence. I think it's easier to take risk when you have more confidence in yourself, your abilities, your skill set, your network. That's a huge part of it. And the other is just experience. To your point, calculated risk. There's a huge difference between taking any risk and taking a calculated risk. And I think when you have more experience, a broader skill set, more confidence, you've just seen a lot more different things, variety of things, that making the calculation, you just get better at it. And so it actually feels a little less risky, even though it is risk, because you feel like you're maybe in some level of control of the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was young, I was too dumb to know better. So I was risky and not realizing it, And now I feel like, to your point, like I know that hardly anyone knows what they're doing. So you just got to get out there and put in the work. And then I also know, between my network, what I know how to do and how I can structure things. Like it doesn't feel as risky, even though it
Yeah.
is risky.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% true.
Okay. I have a question that I only ask men.
No,
Well, because as a female entrepreneur in Utah, I've been asked this. I never ask women this. Well, I have, but differently. How do you balance like homework and family?
Homework and family.
Yeah, like working,
Oh,
being a good dad.
man. Well, I don't know that I'm totally qualified to answer the question, because I don't know that I'm doing an amazing job at it. I would say, work-wise, I tend to live my life a little bit like a bento box,
Okay.
right? When you look at a bento box, you have these little compartments, right? You have your compartment for your rice and compartment for sushi, meat, whatever it might be. And I think I look at my life similar, where I have my work compartment, I have my family compartment, I have my friend compartment, I have my kids compartment, neighbors, church, whatever it might be. And I just have to be really intentional, really, about scheduling and where I'm going to spend my time. That's the hardest part. And there have been times where I've been completely out of balance, where I'm spending way too much time in one of the compartments of the bento box, and others have suffered because of that. And it's usually either my work, just, either traveling a lot or working too much or too many hours, and I'm starting to neglect the other things, or, personal time for myself. I'm wired a little weird, where I absolutely have to make time for myself, or else it gets really ugly really fast. I mean, I turn into a terrible version of myself, which sounds selfish, and maybe to some extent it is. But when things get out of balance, it's usually because I'm spending too much time in one of those two areas. But we have to be, my wife and I have to be really thoughtful around when we spend time together as a family. Dinner time is important to us. We sit together as a family. Our weekends are usually important to us, especially Sundays, with our own family and visiting family. We have some time for just my wife and I. I have time that's just for my kids. And time really is the measuring stick for me on how important people are, or activities are, as far as my activities, where we have a finite amount of time in any given day, and where we choose to spend it is an indicator of where our priorities are. So, yeah, I think it comes down to scheduling and planning, and being fairly disciplined about your calendar and your schedule, and making sure that trying to make time for the things that matter. The bigger half to that equation is really my wife. I mean, the way our family is managed, she is 100 times better than I am. She's just better at everything than I am. But she's very good at being cognizant of the needs of our family and our children and what's going on the personal front, knowing that, I work a lot and it's a stressful and a demanding job, and that's just kind of comes with the game.
Yeah. How do you, I require a lot of alone time too, but how do you recharge when you're alone? Just by yourself, reading books,
Yes.
working out?
No, for me, it's about being active. Every day I have to feel like, if I don't, I get almost anxiety and panicky. Like I have to do something active. I have to get my heart rate up. I have to feel like I'm burning energy or doing something. So I spend a lot of time mountain biking. I race dirt bikes. I still fairly competitive in beach volleyball. I could play a fair amount of that. We're outdoor enthusiasts, so we wake surf, we snowboard, camping, hunting, fishing. I mean, anything that will get me outside, being active, doing something, getting, vitamin D from the sun. Like I'm gonna love that.
True, work hard, play hard kind of guy then,
Yeah.
What's a piece of advice you would give someone starting out
Starting out their career?
in like investing or consulting or entrepreneurism? You've done it all, Aaron.
Yeah. I think the first piece of advice would be, I feel like I probably made this mistake, is I felt like I needed to chart out a path and be very deliberate and intentional and plan and like execute to that path. And I feel like I've actually done it pretty well. I mean, my career's taken some turns and some weird detours here and there, but I don't know that that's really how the world works anymore, where you're going to pick a career or decide what you're going to do, and you're going to do it for the next 10, 15, 20 years. I would probably tell people to be a little more open-minded and opportunistic around businesses, startups, opportunities, coaches, mentors that may take you down a path that you didn't think you would go down, or maybe it doesn't seem like it's all that glamorous or sexy, but it could be a really great place to kind of build a business or start a career or make some money. I think being a little more fluid is definitely one piece of advice I would give. Going back to the risk, like I would absolutely give the advice to young professionals or entrepreneurs to take risk earlier rather than later. And then the last one would be to find a very good mentor, somebody that will stick with you over the next chapter or two of your career. I didn't have that. I wish I would have. I wish I would have been more proactive and intentional about identifying what I would want in a coach or a mentor or a friend, somebody that I could look up to and aspire to be and get advice from. I've since had that. It makes a huge difference. But I would encourage younger professionals to do it much earlier in their career.
Do you thrive in a schedule, routine? Are you a routine kind of guy?
Yeah, I do. I feel like I have to be, just because there's a lot of demands on my time. So yeah, I'm pretty disciplined to a schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You seem like a schedule guy, like out there building your routines. Does everything in your life live on a spreadsheet?
No, I don't manage it in spreadsheets. Believe me, I've lived too much in spreadsheets. They give me headaches now. But yeah, routines are good. That's how I find discipline in what I'm doing.
Okay. We're going to do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What's your favorite food?
Steak.
Just straight up. How do you like it?
Medium rare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you make it yourself?
I do sometimes. I mean, I can appreciate a good steak from a nice restaurant, but I can make pretty good steak too.
Okay. Is that your midnight snack?
Not anymore. I have to actually cut back on red meat. It's been a tough.
You do? Your doctor said?
Yeah, unfortunately I don't have genetics on my side when it comes to heart disease.
Okay.
My dad had his first heart attack when he was 26.
Stop it.
And his second when he was 29.
Oh my gosh.
So I had my first heart scan done, and I have to be super careful. So I'm now starting to cut out red meats and cholesterols and fats. And
have you done NADs yet?
D's?
NAD. It's a acronym. It's like a really long one. You do it through an IV, but essentially like the small part or the part of your cell that shrinks, it's the part that repeats itself. Okay. It lengthens it back out. Huh. I just started doing it and it's wild.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You noticing a difference? Like
huge
feel
difference?
No kidding.
Yes. My husband and I have been doing it.
Wow.
The first little bit you want to do once a week for like 4 or 6 weeks. And then you can like spread it out over like once a month or once a quarter or whatever. It's really cool.
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
I'm big onto anti-aging health stuff.
Yeah. I actually, have you watched the series called Limitless?
No.
That's a must see.
Okay.
The guy who plays Thor in the Marvel movies, Chris Hemsworth, or Hemsworth, whatever his name is. It's an amazing series. And it's all about anti-aging, things you can do to live a higher quality of life as you get, deeper into your years. And it covers everything from breathing to meditation, exercise, nutrition, fasting, cold water baths, saunas. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff. And it was a life changer for me. So look into that.
Do you do cold plunge?
Not yet. It's on the list. I wouldn't mind doing it, but it's not something that's readily available here.
No, I feel like it's a new CrossFit.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. Yeah. You can't do it without putting it on Instagram these days.
Right.
What, Abby? Do you cold plunge, Abby? No, she will soon. I know. I saw one though. I'll send you the link for $99. You just put it in your backyard.
Yeah.
Fill it up with a hose.
Okay.
It's like
I have like a plastic kiddie pool for my 5-year-old. Would that work? Maybe I'll just start doing that.
Well, yeah. I mean, they say when you first start, you want to get up to your waist, and then I haven't actually done. I've just read a ton about it. This is how I do stuff. Is I like research it fully.
Yeah.
To decide if it's something I want to do. And then
But then when you do it, do you commit to it and like really go in?
Thousands of dollars on it.
Yeah.
So you want to get up to your waist, up to your chest is like kind of the second measurement. I don't know. I think I'd be good at it, but we'll see.
No, there are a lot of things out there, and I'm sure they have their benefits. I haven't been, hardcore into any of it, but I'm trying to be better now that I'm in my mid-40s, and I feel like I'm kind of at the, halfway mark. And it was probably the better half in terms of your health and fitness. So it's only going to get harder from here.
Something about turning 44 did that to me where I'm like, well, this could really be half of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how am I going to live the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Just really taking care of yourself.
It's the halftime show. You get to kind of reevaluate and go to the drawing board and figure out what we're going to do in the second half.
Yeah. Cut back on the sweets and the red meat.
Mm-hmm. It's too bad, though, because I do love steak. It really is my favorite food.
There's kind of nothing like it. Are you a big seafood eater?
I like seafood, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same.
No.
But who's your favorite entrepreneur?
Is that a loaded question?
Well, what?
You know who my partner is, right?
Yeah, no, I know, but he's out. You can't pick him.
I don't get to pick Jeremy?
No, it's a given.
Yeah.
It's like when I ask people their favorite podcast, they can't pick mine if they're on it.
Yeah. Boy, that's a good question. Man.
It's like picking your favorate kid.
I know. Well, that's easier for me right now. I have a 5-year-old and I have a 19-year-old.
It's the 5-year-old, right? Yeah. Because you're so lucky you have such a young one while you have a teenager.
Yeah.
You're so lucky.
Yeah, that wasn't by design, but it worked out that way. And it's funny. My wife said that one day she's going to write a book called 2 Burnt Pancakes. And it's how we just, ruined our kids one at a time. That's why we spaced them out so far.
Yeah. I love it actually. But how fun to
5 is just a great age. I'm sure I loved my 19-year-old when he was 5 just as much. 5, it's the age. 5 is a great age.
Yeah. I love it.
Anyway, back to favorite entrepreneur. Ever or right now?
Right now. You can pick a couple. You can say a couple.
No, we've backed a bunch of really great entrepreneurs. I hate saying a name.
You have to.
No, I'm not going to.
Just top 3. How about that?
Well, we're in a lot, so even just picking 3.
Maybe something you admire about a few of them.
That's a lot easier.
Okay.
Because I actually do have like 1 or 2 that are in mind.
Yeah. But we don't want to make other people feel bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of my favorite attributes of my number 1.
Okay.
is that this particular entrepreneur is one of those people, and it's a him because I'm going to say it. He how do you say this? He does exactly what he says he's going to do. You know, in a world where you hear so many pitches and so much just rah, up and to the right fluff, you know, 99% of which doesn't come to fruition. When you come across an entrepreneur that actually delivers on what they say they're going to do, they do it on time, they do it on budget, they do it really well, just perfect execution, you really come to appreciate that. It's by far my favorite attribute of this particular entrepreneur, and he's a machine. I mean, he's running a great business. It's doing well, but he does exactly what he says he's going to do. He keeps to his commitments. He makes commitments. He keeps them. I mean, he's amazing. So that's one attribute that I really like. And then another, you know, going back to the idea of being a sales focused leader, you know, I can think of one entrepreneur that, they had 7 people working with them on their startup for a year before it ever even went live. Every night, weekends, you know, thousands of hours, man hours, working on a startup with no pay and no equity at that point, just selling them on a vision of something that could be really cool and an absolute game changer for the world of business. And that same attitude is how this entrepreneur raised the first few $100,000 of money. It's how they got their first, you know, dozen pilot beta customers on the platform. But that just kind of gritty salesmanship and getting people bought into what you're doing with no resources at all, I love that. I mean, that's magic.
Yeah.
That's true grit to me.
Yeah. Amazing. Have you read any good books or watched any good shows lately?
So the most recent book I read was called Entitlemania, and really interesting book. And this was more about raising children and things you can, and it doesn't just cover about, you know, spoiling them or giving them stuff. That's part of it. But it's about, you know, children working in a family business and supporting kids into their adult years and how to manage those relationships and dynamics. It was a really, really interesting read.
Entitlemania. I'll look it up.
Yeah, that was a good one. That's the most recent one that I just finished. That was more on kind of the family and personal front. Business wise, you know, I most of my reading is either family focused or business focused. And I just, you know, listen to it while I'm working out. I never actually read paper books. It's all audio books or podcasts.
Love it.
One of those things. That's really the only time I have to do it.
Do you watch any shows? You a show guy?
Not a lot. I go through phases. Usually we hardly watch any TV. Usually when the TV is on, it's just my wife and I, and it's pretty late at night. That's the time that we get to just unwind and spend together. So I enjoy watching shows. It's usually late at night, which is tough, but I just don't have a lot of time to do it. And we go through cycles. I mean, this Limitless one, we like documentaries. We actually just recently started rewatching Friends. You remember that series?
Yes.
Like we used to try to watch it once every other year. It's been like 10 years since we watched it. So we broke that back open and started watching it.
It's just nostalgia, right? Yeah, it's easy. Yeah. Are you early bird or night owl?
By nature, definitely much more of a night owl. I mean, it for most of my career, it was not uncommon for people to get emails from me 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I would usually put my kids down to bed, have a little bit of time, and then, you know, open the computer back up at around 11. And sometimes that would be an hour, and sometimes it would turn into 3 or 4 hours. So I've usually been a night owl, but I'm trying over the last, handful of months, I've been trying to reset that to be an early riser and do more of my personal stuff super early in the morning so that I can preserve the evening more for the family.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What legacy are you trying to build?
Oh, man. Business or personal or both?
Either. You pick.
Yeah.
They never sit alone.
Yeah,
It's
a lot
like-
of the stuff definitely does
Yeah.
carry over. I think I maybe touched a little bit on this earlier, but I'm hoping what I ultimately get remembered for at some point is just the quality of relationships with people. I think about in the line of work that I'm in, it's all about relationships and networking people. We don't actually sell a product and we really don't sell a service. I mean, we have money that we provide to people to help them grow their business. And so it's all about interpersonal relationships and quality of partnership and that kind of stuff. So, how I treat people and the quality of relationships, and whether that's on my personal life or in business life, that's really important to me. Being known as somebody that had ultra high integrity and was honest and treated people fairly, I think that's important. Definitely want to be known as someone who worked hard and accomplished good things. Success can be measured in a lot of different ways, but whether it's on the personal level or the business level, I want to feel like I had a good run and I was successful and actually, accomplished something and made a positive impact to my community around me. Within my family, obviously that's the most important. Am I a good husband, supportive husband? I treat my wife the way that she should be treated? With my children, were they a priority to me? Was I willing to, really spend time with them and teach them, coach them, educate them, support them, whatever it might be? Your role as a parent definitely changes as they get older. But, I never want my family to feel like they were ever a second priority or not the most important thing to me. And I think if I get to the end and those things are true, then probably did okay.
I love that. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
It's
you're
really
welcome.
good.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.